Greetings and welcome back to Room 303, Senior English B, and we now turn to the third of our second generation Romantic poets, the great John Keats. Now we'll have much to say about Keats, but we want to be looking now in your hymnal at page 569 and the introductory materials that are provided for us here. The dates to begin with, and of course this is always a part of our study of Keats, because when you do the mathematics of 1795 to 1821, you're kind of blown away by how young he was when he died. Considered, of course, one of the primary Romantic poets. Unlike his contemporaries, Byron and Shelley, who we've already studied, Keats was not an aristocrat. He was born to working-class Londoners. In 1815, Keats began studying medicine and eventually became an apothecary, a pharmacist. But he soon abandoned that profession to become a poet. In 1818, he publishes his Endymion, a long poem that the critics didn't like. They panned it. Despite the critical rejection, Keats did not swerve from his new career. He soon after met the love of his life, Fanny Brawne, to whom he became engaged. Over a 9-month period, fired with creativity, he wrote the poems for which he's most famous, many of which are considered to be masterpieces. Sadly, Keats succumbed to tuberculosis at the age of 25. He, of course, dies in Rome. There you can see at the Spanish Steps, the room right next to the Spanish Steps in Rome, where he died, and then, of course, is buried in Rome, not in England. And, of course, on his tombstone, here lies one whose name was written in water. We'll have more to say about this in another lecture on Introduction to Keats. Now, Ode to a Nightingale, one of the titles that we'll be studying in the background information on 569. Keats composed Ode to a Nightingale in 1819 while living in Hampstead with his friend Charles Brown. Brown wrote the following description about how the ode was composed. In the spring of 1819, a nightingale had built her nest near my house. Keats felt a tranquil and continued joy in her song, and one morning he took his chair from the breakfast table to the grass plot under the plum tree, where he sat for 2 or 3 hours. When he came into the house, I perceived he had some scraps of paper in his hand, and these he was quietly thrusting behind the books. On inquiry, I found those scraps, 4 or 5 in number, contained his poetic feeling on the song of our nightingale. Now, we begin with John Keats, and by our introductions, When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be, a poem that was written once he knew that he soon must die. And then from there, we'll get on into our study of Keats, including Chapman's Homer, and then, of course, To a Nightingale. Thank you.